Hi guys, my name is Bobby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you my March TBR. So, like I'd said before, computer's still not working great, still editing on my phone, but I can edit on my phone, transfer the video to my old computer. My editing software just doesn't work on it because it can't hold a charge very well. The editing software just glitches all the time, but at least I can move my video to that in order to do my thumbnail and upload and all that stuff. So kind of got it figured out. We'll see how it goes. But still, I'm reading, and that's all that matters. So this month, we got 2 days or a day and a half left in February, and I've done pretty good this month. So when it comes to March, I really struggled trying to decide what my TBR is or is going to be or whatever. I've really enjoyed mood reading, and I realized that since November, every time I film, you were perfectly fine in the window. Perfectly fine. So as I was saying, I've realized since November that I haven't read anything physically since November. It's all been on my Kindle or my Kindle app, whatever, since like November. Like I was flipping and going through like my Goodreads and my read, and every single one I've read on my Kindle, which is interesting. I only used to really read physically. And when I first started getting back into reading, it was mostly on my Kindle because I subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, and I found all sorts of stuff like indie thrillers and horror and stuff like that. And then as it kept, then I found BookTube, and it was like, from there. But for some reason, I've only been able to read on my Kindle, and I do not understand it. Like maybe it's convenience. Like I can then read on my phone, like when I'm out or whatever. I don't know what the deal is. So when I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my shelves and looking at all the books that I haven't read, literally I don't want to read any of them. And I don't think it's because I don't want to read them like forever. It's just, it doesn't appeal to me to pick them up. Also, apologies if you can hear my children. Both of my teenage children are home. My daughter is in her room, and I've heard her cackling all fucking morning since I got home from work. So if you hear random loud screaming and cackling, that's her. She's on a FaceTime with one of her friends. And my son is in the kitchen, and he's walking around and talking to himself and watching videos. So if you can hear them, I apologize. I'm a mom, and this is filming time. They're both home. It's Saturday. So apologies. But as I was saying, when I look at my shelf, like nothing jumps out to me that I want to read, like literally nothing. I haven't read a thriller since sometime last year, probably I think like this time last year in 2020, like March maybe, like since right before COVID hit. And I've been sitting here thinking like, why is that? And I think it's because I got like tired of them. Like you kind of got burnt out. When you read so many of the same genre, like especially thrillers, like everything starts to run together and all of the twists you can predict. And I was like, I'm done. So I stopped reading those. And that's when I was getting more into fantasy and stuff like that. And now, since July, and you can blame Becca from Becca in the Books for this, I'm super balls deep, no pun intended, into fantasy romance, and I can't seem to pull myself out of it. Not that that's a bad thing. Reading is reading. If you're entertained and you're having fun, that's the whole fucking point. But I know that's what a lot of you didn't sign up for when you subscribed to my channel. Like originally, like I was reading mostly horror and thrillers, some contemporary-ish. Becca, I think, she mentioned it in one of our sprints, patron sprints, that she's pretty much corrupted my channel, and it's not her fault because I choose to read what I read, but I blame her because she's the one that got me to read ACOTAR, and it's been a downhill since then. And I'm loving it. I'm really, really enjoying them, and they're fun. Like I get the fantasy elements, and usually I'm not a romance person. I don't like contemporary romance. I don't like the historical romances where the whole entire story is about a girl trying to find a husband and a man, and with the romance like that, no. With the fantasy romance, I get the fantasy elements that I love, but then I also get like the sexy time and a little bit of smut, or sometimes a lot of smut, and you get the romance that's built into the story, but you still have this overarching fantasy plot. and I'm fucking loving them. I've read 5 books this month, 5, almost 6, something like that in the month of February, which is great. That's probably one of the best reading months I've had in 6, 7 months or more. And it's pretty much all fantasy romance. And I feel bad, like apologetic, because that's not what a lot of you signed up for. And I have not picked up anything else. Like looking at, like, I can't even remember the last non-fantasy romance book I read. The Hunger in October by Amakatsu, which is my book club pick. Me, Vicky, and my book club pick. I think that was the last non-fantasy romance book I read that I can remember off the top of my head. And that was on Kindle. And, you know, Brother was our pick by Anya Alborn was our pick for January. I haven't read it. I didn't even attempt to pick it up. It did not appeal to me at all. I didn't want to pick it up at all. Like, I sat there and looked at it. I saw that Vicky and Mike and a couple other people in the Goodreads group were reading it and they were really enjoying it. And I just did not want to pick it up. And I felt like such a piece of shit, because this is a book club that Vicky and I created together. We chose these books. We both wanted to read these books. And because I slumped so hard in 2020, it was like anything to get me out. And so while I tease Becca and troll her constantly for, you know, throwing me down this fantasy romance rabbit hole, she also kind of saved my reading, because I wasn't reading shit at all. I was lucky to read 1, maybe 2 books a month, because I was slumping so hard because of being stuck at home, my husband and kids being stuck at home. I'm the only one working. I was working overtime all the time. I was tired. When I got home, I just wanted to lay around and watch TV and not do anything. Like, I had no focus to read. The depression was setting in. We were struggling. Like, a whole bunch of other people were struggling, and I just didn't want to read. And so when she got me in July, convinced me to read the ACOTAR series, and I binge read it it was my birthday week. I was on vacation and I binged the entire trilogy and fell in love with it. And here we are. It's kind of like snowball effect to where I just kept picking them up because I enjoyed it and I could get through them really fast. And why not? And part of it was Sarah J. Maas's writing. Part of it was just like, you know, being able to talk about it with other people who also enjoy it and getting tons of recommendations. And that's how I found like From Blood and Ash and like just other stories. Like Kindle Unlimited is full of fantasy romance stories, some better than others, but tons of fantasy romance stories you can get into. And I never thought that I would be at this point, yet here we are. So when it comes to reading physically, I have no desire at the moment to read physically, and I have tons of books sitting there that are really good and I really want to read, but I have no desire to read them right now. So for me, this has been a huge struggle because I have so many beautiful books. I have books that people bought me for Christmas, for my birthday, and I want to read them, but I also don't want to read them right now. And I feel like a big giant piece of shit because I feel like I'm being ungrateful. And there's so many, like my book of the month, I have over 25, I think, book of the month books that I have yet to read. And they're all books I picked. I skip months if I don't like what's being offered. And I've skipped a couple months in the last few, but I have over 25 book of the month books that I have not read and are sitting on my shelves. I mean, some of them I had for years, like The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I've had that for probably at least 2 years now. There's so many, and you get the book guilt. And how did this turn into a TBR? To me, just digressing, but still, I have a lot of guilt for that. Like a guilt that I'm not reading the gifts that people so generously bought me when they didn't have to do anything of the sort. And they're all books that I put on my wish list that I want to read. And yet here they sit. And I'm just reading on my Kindle. I have bought books or books that were bought for me. I have bought for my Kindle so I'm like double buying them. Being like, oh, well, if I can't read physically, maybe I'll just buy it for my Kindle and read it that way. Still not working. I'm still just reading fantasy romance. So I don't know if that's going to continue in March. There is a couple books I want to get to in March. I'm just bringing the dust jacket because it's already taken off because I did start this a couple months ago, but I do want to continue Throne of Glass. So Empire Storms is next. I'm going to buddy read this with Brandy, who is on Becca's Discord. She's one of Becca's patrons, same as I. So we're going to read this together. We've been reading, she joined me reading Throne of Glass at, I can't remember, the last book? Queen of Shadows, I think. Because we read that one together. So we're going to read Empire Storms together. I wanted to finish this last year. Didn't happen. Definitely going to finish it this year. So this I'm going to read in March. There's one other book that is physical that I want to try to get to. I think I'm going to try to dip my toes back into physical. I feel like if I force myself when I just do not feel like reading physically, it's just not going to end well. And when I'm just so easy to read on my Kindle. So we'll see. This sounds so silly and stupid. Does anybody else feel like this, where they go through phases where I only want to read audio or I only want to read physical or whatever and nothing appeals? It's driving me insane because I feel so much book guilt. I have so many books, not as many as Sarah, who has over 700 and something from Sarah's Nightstand. She has like 750 something. Maybe it was close to 780. Either way, it was an overwhelming amount. I don't have that much. I think I looked, my physical TBR is right around 100. So it's really not that bad, but still, that's 100 books. Like, I'm looking over here at Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction bought that for me for Christmas. I believe it was for Christmas. And it's a beautiful book. She's the sweetest person for buying that for me. Still haven't read it. I've been dying to read it. I've heard mixed reviews, but mostly positive. I've been dying to read it, but it's physical. Don't want to pick it up. It's physical, deckled edges. Don't want to pick it up. Kingsbane by Clara Grant. It's the second book in the Furyborn trilogy. Book 3 has already come out. I've had it for 2 years. Really want to read it and continue that series. Haven't picked it up because it's physical. Sword of Kagan. Got that for Christmas from Cody. Still haven't picked it up. Big, thick fantasy book. I've heard amazing things about it. It's physical. Don't want to pick it up. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So many people, they love it. It's their favorite book ever. Not a big fan of V.E. Schwab. I've struggled with her books before. Thought I'd give that one a chance. It's physical. Haven't picked it up. It's just sitting there on my shelf. So many. I have 2 Lisa Jewells. I love Lisa Jewell. She writes more of like a mystery. She's not a thriller. She's like one of those nice kind of quiet, not a cozy mystery, but almost, where there's a little bit of thriller vibes in there, but it's more like small town, like all these different people like are doing weird shit and you're just trying to figure out what's going on. Love those kind of stories. Have 2 of them. Haven't picked them up. So I'm really struggling with the guilt of not picking up my physical books, especially when so many people have bought me books and I bought myself a whole bunch of physical books that I'm dying to read, and I'm dying to read them, but I also don't want to read them because they're physical and it sounds really stupid. So we'll see how March goes. But there is another book, and this was my book of the month pick for February, and I really want to get to this one because it sounds amazing. I haven't looked to see if anybody else has read it yet. I should check the Goodreads. But this is Girl A by Abigail Dean. This is a contemporary. It's on Book of the Month. It's shown as contemporary, but it's like a contemporary. I wouldn't call it a thriller, but a contemporary literary fiction, because I'm not usually big on contemporaries, but this is a story about a girl. I think her name's Lexi or Lex. Her name is Lex. She comes from a very abusive, horrific family, and she escapes. She's the eldest child. She escapes and then comes back and retrieves her siblings, and her mother dies in prison, and her dad never got out of the horrors. Mom dies in prison. Their family home that they escaped from is left to them. So it's about the siblings going back to the house and dealing with their demons and everything that happened to them, and about her being one of the kids that got away and dealing with all that. So I'm assuming there's going to be high trigger warnings for abuse and other things. I mean, from what I hear, it's pretty graphic. So something like that interests me because it's family dynamic with some nasty, creepy, dark things. So that's why I picked it, because it was like, ooh, that sounds right up my alley. I keep staring at it, haven't picked it up. I'm wanting to pick it up in March. I'm hoping this one and reading Empire Storms will help kick me back into reading physically, because I miss it, but I also don't. The struggle is real. I feel like I sound like a crazy. I feel like I sound irrational, which I'm pretty sure I do. I'm pretty sure I sound irrational, but I don't know. It makes sense to me. We'll see. So that's enough of my rambling. But that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm not really setting a March TBR. I'm kind of going to mood read. I'm going to try to read Empire Storms and Girl A and see if that can get me back into physical reading. Other than that, I think I'm just going to try to mood read. I've got fantasy romance on my Kindle. I'm sure I'll be reading lots of those. And we'll see how it goes. Like if I can dip my toe in and get back to physical reading, maybe I'll start picking books off the shelf. I really want to read. I want to get a lot of my book of the month books read because they're all books I want to read and they've just been sitting there. I also really want to get to Elton John's autobiography that's sitting over there staring at me because I absolutely love him and I love the movie. And I feel like I'm beating myself up even though I'm reading. I'm doing okay. Like I'm reading. I read 5 books so far in the month of February, 5 books. And most of those books were 400 pages at least. I mean, there were a couple that were less, but I read a couple bigger books and I need to stop beating myself up. But that is it. I'm done rambling. That's my tentative March TBR. 2 books that I'm really hoping to read. The rest I'm just leaving up to mood reading and up in the air. The mood reading seems to be helping and kind of help keep me going. So, again, not trying to talk shit about Becca. That I do, but I don't. I blame her for throwing me down the fantasy romance rabbit hole, but she also helped pull me out of my almost 7-8 month reading slump. So while I control her and, tease her about it, it's also like, thank you for helping me get out of one of the worst slumps I've ever been in. And while I've kind of fallen down the rabbit hole because I don't want to lose that momentum, I feel bad because that's all I'm reading. And I know some of you really don't give a shit about fantasy romance. You're like, this is not what I signed up for. And so again, I apologize. But then again, I feel bad for apologizing because I should be able to read whatever the fuck I want to read. So here we are, endless loop. I'm done rambling. But that is my March TBR, if you can call this a TBR. Please let me know in the comments down below what you're reading for March. Is there any good suggestions of books that have really pulled you in that might kind of pull me out of my rabbit hole so that I'm reading more than just fantasy romance? Please let me know. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.